When we think about global power, our minds almost immediately jump to tech giants, massive economies, or military might. But the true hidden heartbeat of the global economy? It's shipping. This invisible, sprawling network literally dictates the price of everything you buy, right down to your morning coffee or the smartphone you're probably holding right now. And for decades, the absolute, undisputed king of these seas has been Greece. But today, in this explainer, we're diving into a really fierce, fascinating, and deeply complex dynamic happening right now between Greece and a rising titan, China. We are effectively transitioning into what experts are calling a two-model era of maritime dominance. And honestly, understanding how these two vastly different strategies operate is absolutely crucial if we want to understand the future of our global supply chains. So let's get into it.
Okay, get this. A recent, pretty jarring statistic from the BRS Shipbroking Report reveals a massive historic shift. China has officially overtaken Greece. When we look at beneficial ownership, which basically just means the entities actually pulling the strings and reaping the profits, China now controls roughly a quarter of the entire global fleet by vessel numbers. Greece, the historical heavyweight, is sitting at about 11%. Now, at first glance, this looks like a classic textbook story of one superpower dethroning another, right? But shipping is a highly cyclical, intensely capital-heavy industry, and in this world, absolute size doesn't automatically mean absolute dominance. There is so much more going on beneath the surface of these numbers.
And that brings us to a huge mystery that we really need to unravel. Now, China's phenomenal growth, it makes perfect logical sense. It's totally fueled by an enormous domestic cargo base. China single-handedly accounts for over 40% of all global seaborne bulk imports and 14% of merchandise exports. So expanding their fleet is literally a hard requirement just to secure their own massive supply chains. But then you have the Greek mystery. How in the world did a country like Greece dominate the seas for so long when they have practically zero domestic cargo to move? Greece simply doesn't have the domestic trade volume to support even a tiny fraction of its current fleet size.
Well, the answer lies in one staggering number: 98%. Over 98% of Greek-controlled capacity is actually deployed in third-country trades. Think about that for a second. Their immense maritime power doesn't come from moving Greek goods, it comes from moving the rest of the world's goods. They're the ultimate international middlemen. In the industry, they call them tramp shippers, which essentially means they just roam the globe, picking up whatever cargo is available wherever it's needed. They built an entire empire on third-party transportation. It completely proves that you don't actually need your own cargo to be a global powerhouse. You just have to be the absolute best at moving everyone else's.
So what we're really looking at here aren't just two countries, but two totally different philosophies of maritime power. On one hand, China's strategy relies heavily on absolute scale, deep industrial integration, and serious state support. To give you an idea, state-owned companies make up about 64% of China's new building orders. It's massive. Greece, on the flip side, relies on pure commercial agility. Their whole model is deeply rooted in international finance, tight private family networks, and this generational, almost instinctive expertise in buying and selling maritime assets at precisely the right time. Basically, it boils down to state-backed scale versus private, agile networking.
And when we map out where these ships actually travel on a daily basis, the contrast is just stark. Chinese-controlled dry bulk vessels are super concentrated in the Asia-Pacific region. They are fiercely servicing their own massive, hungry trade ecosystem. Meanwhile, Greek bulkers, they're scattered to the winds. You'll find them totally evenly distributed across Africa, the Middle East, South Asia, Europe, the Americas, literally everywhere. Greece operates this beautifully decentralized, highly mobile network that can basically just pivot at a moment's notice to wherever the global market demands it.
To really grasp how Greece survives and, honestly, thrives during this modern shift in the rankings, we have to rewind. We have to look back at history. Because this tactical agility, it isn't some clever modern business pivot they cooked up last decade. It is a centuries-old survival strategy. The roots of this highly flexible, border-crossing merchant culture actually go all the way back to the pre-industrial Ottoman era. Greek-speaking Orthodox merchants living under Ottoman rule obviously couldn't rely on the backing of a powerful industrial state, so they had to invent a completely different kind of power: the power of the intermediary. These early Ottoman Greek merchants didn't thrive through military might. They thrived through incredibly tight-knit kinship bonds, which they called fraternitas. They relied on constant economic migration, literally packing up and moving to wherever trade was flowing the most profitably. They acted as these vital bridges between massive clashing empires. And because they were operating in these highly volatile, often untrustworthy environments, their personal reputation and strict moral obligations were everything.
That reputation acted as the ultimate ironclad guarantee in all their high-stakes financial transactions. Your word was literally your bond.
It's just wild to look at the historical records and see how medium-sized merchant houses, families like the Garussi and the Marcellas, operated almost like pre-industrial multinational corporations. They would strategically plant family members in major ports across three deeply competing empires: the Dutch, the Venetian, and the Ottoman. By doing that, they created this closed, unbreachable network of trust. They didn't produce the goods, and they definitely didn't control the empires, but they absolutely controlled the connections between them. They were, without a doubt, the original, agile networkers of the pre-industrial age.
Fast forward to today, and that exact same historical DNA of asset allocation is exactly what gives Greece its superpower against China's modern industrial might. The reality is, in a market as incredibly fragmented and cyclical as shipping, operational capability and market flexibility can matter just as much as, and honestly sometimes way more than, absolute fleet size. Greek ship owners are legendary for their razor-sharp commercial instincts. They have this uncanny intuition to buy ships when asset prices completely tank, and the ruthless discipline to sell off those mature assets the second-hand values spike.
So, losing that #1 ranking in sheer volume, it isn't a retreat for Greece at all. It's actually a brilliant, perfectly calculated cash out. They are currently executing a super deliberate strategy of active fleet renewal. They're taking full advantage of sky-high secondhand prices to sell off their older, mature vessels. We're talking ships averaging about 19 years old. And guess who is eagerly buying them up? Around 39% of those secondhand bulk carriers sold by Greek owners are being acquired by Chinese buyers. Greece is actively recycling its capital, turning aging, depreciating metal into premium liquid cash.
Which leads us to the ultimate, kind of ironic twist in this whole relationship. Over half, 55% to be exact, of the Greek-controlled dry bulk capacity is actually built in Chinese shipyards. So let that sink in. Greece is taking the cash they make from selling their older ships to Asian buyers, and they are funneling it right back into China to build brand new, hyper-efficient, state-of-the-art vessels. So, instead of some simple David versus Goliath rivalry, these two models are deeply, fundamentally symbiotic. Just look at the sheer scale of the cooperation here. Greek owners currently have a massive 133 vessels under construction in China. Compare that to a mere 19 being built everywhere else in the world combined. This makes Greek owners the second largest customer group for Chinese shipyards, right behind Chinese owners themselves. They might compete fiercely for scale out on the open water, but behind the scenes at the shipyard, their interests are entirely intertwined.
And look, this centuries-old Greek culture of maritime networking, asset trading, and navigating global waters, it's not fading out. It is deliberately being passed down. There are modern initiatives like Irene Natia's Project Connect and the Adoptership Program that are actively working to ensure this tacit knowledge, this deeply ingrained business culture of the sea, is directly transferred to the next generation. Today's Greek shipping community is fiercely protecting its absolute greatest asset, human capital. Because in an age of increasing automation and AI, this specialized generational gut instinct for navigating global trade is something a machine simply cannot replicate. So as we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a critical question, something to really chew on regarding how global power actually works in this new two-model era. Think about it. When the next major geopolitical shock or the next huge energy transition hits and completely shakes up our supply chains, what will matter more for long-term influence? Will it be the massive industrial coordination and absolute size of your fleet, like we see with China? Or will it be the global operating experience and pure commercial agility of your network, like we see with Greece? Because one thing is for sure, the dynamic interplay between these two fascinating models is absolutely going to define the future of global trade.